Um, Welcome, everybody. Welcome for joining us to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory Fellowship Information Session. Just some ground rules first. We are recording these talks, so please be aware that anything you put in or say will be recorded. Also, this is an open, unclassified forum, so participants should be mindful also of any export and classification issues. And also to save on bandwidth, please keep your cameras off unless you are a speaker. There will be a question and answer period at the end. Please enter your questions in the chat field and we will answer them after all the talks. So this will be the schedule. So I will start off with the welcome general introduction and talk about the High Energy Density Science Fellowship. Dr. Ted Ballman will introduce the Lawrence Fellowship. Dr. Arjun Gambhir will introduce the Foster and Brown Fellowships, and then followed by Daniel Osei-Kuffer, who will do the Sydney Fernbach postdoctoral fellowship. And then we'll have questions and answers. So as for the High Energy Density Science postdoctoral fellowship, I am the chair of the fellowship committee. So I'm also the deputy director of the High Energy Density Science Center. And welcome to this talk. So for some general background, all these fellowships are at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. There are actually 17 national laboratories that are part of the Department of Energy System, and they range from ones that are general science or all the way to technology, and then there are ones that are single purpose here in this inner arc, to ones that have multi-purpose laboratories. The three biggest are Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Sandia National Laboratory. And Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is actually the third biggest. We've got almost, I think, 10,000 employees, and we're located in California in the Greater Bay Area. So here's a nice little map. So you can see how far away we are from San Francisco. And we're roughly equidistant from San Francisco and San Jose, and Stockton are the three major population centers. We're not so close to the coast that we're always cold and foggy in the summertime, and not so far inland that we're in the total desert. And so I think the weather is really nice here. The lab has existed since 1952, so we're relatively mature now. And we have a total budget of about $3.71 billion. So that's nice. Lets us do lots of great science. And we're located, our main campus is just 1 square mile. So this is a very high concentration of scientists doing excited research. And as I said, almost 10,000 employees, of which well over 300 are postdoctoral researchers. So if you became a postdoc here, you'd have lots of great company. So these national labs, by the way, the main purpose of a national laboratory is to do big science that can't be done at an academic institution, where you need large collaborations of teams to do exciting work. And so I'll talk a little bit more about those. So we have at the lab several things that we focus on, our core competencies. And by big science, like we have some of the biggest computers in the world. Right now, our fastest computer, El Capitan, recently got unseated as the fastest. It's now the second fastest computer in the world, but that's not the only supercomputer we have. We also have lots of specialization in lasers and optical science and technology. In fact, one common joke is that Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, the LLNL, stands for lasers, lasers, and nothing but lasers. But we do lots of other science too. We have a focus on nuclear and chemical and isotopic science and technology. There's the rapidly growing field of advanced materials and manufacturing, earth and atmospheric science, and of course, bioscience and bioengineering. But the focus of the fellowship I will be presenting is high energy density science. Now, that's not a term that you might be familiar with. So just what is high energy density science? And one common definition is it's the material properties and behavior of material that has pressure greater than 1 megabar. So this solid black line is roughly where 1 megabar is on a density temperature plot. To get a sense of how much pressure that would be the pressure that you would be under if you tried to hold up the Empire State Building with your bare hands. So it's pretty large, and that's comparable to the pressure at the center of the Earth. We also care about systems of even much greater pressure. So, for example, at the center of giant planets like Jupiter, brown dwarfs, the center of the sun is starting to get up into the gigabar range. And during inertial confinement fusion, which happens at the National Ignition Facility, which is the only experimental facility ever created that can have greater power out than power in using fusion. So that's a definition of ignition. Is it even more extreme than the center of the sun in terms of both temperature and pressure and density. So high energy density science is a very broad field where we need experts in many, many different areas. So I mentioned materials properties, there's high pressure physics, we need laser physics in order to reach these extreme conditions. We need many diagnostics to assess our experiments. There are similar conditions found in astrophysics. Need to know what the equation of state is, the opacity of these systems, need to be able to study fusion, hologram physics, which is the metal can that inertial confinement fusion is done in. There's lots of exciting atomic physics. As you reach very high temperatures, you access all the many states of atoms and ions. There are laser plasma interactions. The list keeps going on. And to be able to simulate all these things, of course, you need high performance computing, which is really a bedrock of stuff we do. And as you can see, there are lots of different experiments and simulations and systems that access high energy density science. And if you want to learn more about different research areas, feel free to scan this QR code that takes us to the HEDS Center's research website. Okay, so as for the fellowship itself, we've gone through 6 different cycles of selecting one fellow each year, or sorry, 7 cycles. And so this will be the 8th that we're starting right now. Of our graduates, 2 have gone on to become staff members at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and the 3rd got a nice fancy position at Meta doing interesting AI type stuff. Give you a sense of the number of candidates that we have. Recently, we've gotten up to about 25 candidates, and we only award 1 fellowship to those 25. So we are rather competitive, but we do try to get alternate positions for some of the other top candidates who don't quite get the fellowship. The main purpose of this fellowship is to attract highly talented HED scientists to Livermore and make sure that we get the word out that high energy density science is an exciting thing to do for research. And our fellows are basically ambassadors that present neat research on many different topics and advertise our stuff to the greater world. Our fellowships tend to be very well paid. I think these fellowships are probably, if not the best paying postdoctoral fellowships in the world, they're very nearly so. The HEDS postdoctoral fellowship lasts for 2 years with the guaranteed funding, and if we can find more funding, we can extend that to a 3rd. And here are the application deadlines. Those are coming up in a couple months, so please get started right away when you're ready. So as for eligibility, there's one condition that applies to almost all positions at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. There's a law passed at the beginning of 2025 that restricts access to sites like Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, so that if you are a Chinese, Russian, Iranian, or North Korean citizen, this would apply to you unless you also have dual US citizenship or a legal permanent residency status. Um, so if you fall into that category, my apologies, you are not eligible for this fellowship. You also need to be about to or have completed a PhD in a hydrogen science related field. This could be anything from physics, chemistry, applied math, and many others, as long as you can make a case that it applies to a field of interest to us. And we do not have a limit anymore on the number of years since your PhD, but of course it should make sense that this should be the natural progression of your career. I do also for this fellowship require that you get endorsed from a prospective mentor who must be a permanent research staff member at Livermore. So this serves multiple purposes. First, it ensures that it's one filter on the candidates, so we ensure that we get good candidates applying and that you would be a good fit at the National Laboratory. But it also helps your application. So when you get a prospective mentor, they should be able to help you fine-tune your research proposal and make sure that you're writing something that is of interest to us. So other than those requirements, we also have several qualifications. We are looking for very creative and exceptional candidates with proven accomplishments. So you should have lots of great peer-reviewed papers and other accomplishments on your CV. You need to write a very clear research proposal and should be something that is relevant to us at the National Lab, and that's why I'm saying it's key to talk to people at Livermore to get a sense for what is important to us. But also, of course, explore our website, and that should also give you a sense of the types of things we care about. Then you also have to have demonstrated potential for a sustained technical contribution, even beyond your postdoc. Strategic importance to Lawrence Livermore, and also, of course, proficient verbal and written communication skills by virtue of having great papers and also giving great research seminar during your interview. So how to actually put together an application? Well, there are several key steps. So step one, make sure to find a good prospective mentor. I can help with this if you're really stuck. We do have on our research webpage many points of contact. Please don't spam all of them, but you can reach out to a couple and try to find a good match. And again, reach out to me if that's an issue. We can then discuss with your prospective mentor any research ideas that you have, and start putting together that proposal. You need to also reach out to 3 references, and you'll provide those names as part of your application. And then start drafting your research proposal and make sure to get feedback from your prospective mentor and many others. On our fellowship website, we provide a template for that proposal. Please use it. You'll be at a definite disadvantage if you do not. Then submit, of course, your CV, your proposal, your references, and transcripts by October 5th. and we will expect the reference letters by a week later. And I will myself seek out the endorsement from your prospective mentor. All right, and that I should receive by a week later as well. So this is the process for selection. So first, it'll take us a couple months to review all the applications and narrow down the field of applicants to a short list. Usually 6 applications will make the short list. Then in mid-December, I will ask the prospective mentors to give, of that short list, to give a short presentation to the committee to make the case that you're a good fit at the National Lab and how your project would fit into the context of other things that we do here. So that by the end of the calendar year, we can notify the finalists. Typically, we invite 3 finalists for interviews, which happen early in the next calendar year. And then we notify the preferred candidate in March, and hopefully are able to then close the position by April, May timeframe. And then candidates typically start in the fall following this whole process, so a bit like a year from now. There's flexibility on the exact start date, but we usually aim for October plus or minus a few months. So I also want to make a case of how you would actually maximize your chances of getting the fellowship. I think one of the most important things is to basically have a champion. So this would be your prospective mentor who thinks highly of you, who thinks you'd be a really strong candidate. And it really helps to network to find that champion who can push your application forward and help you write a really great research proposal. So something you have direct control over is you want to have multiple first author peer-reviewed papers, preferably in high-impact journals. And your reference letters should be able to make the case of their importance. And as always, it's a good idea to start writing now. Don't procrastinate, because the sooner you start, the sooner you can get detailed feedback from all your mentors. And then being a good fit to the National Laboratory is also very important. So your work should add to, so it should be, something fundamentally new that we don't have, but also be complementary to stuff that's already here. And then your entire application should also make the case that you will thrive at Livermore. So we want our fellows to have successful careers. So if you can make the genuine case that you will thrive here, that's a big plus. So that is the end of my presentation. Our next talk will be from Ted Wallman, who will tell you about the Lawrence Fellowship. And I will stop sharing.
All right, so one of the nice things about going second here is that Paul has already set the stage for a lot of things, so I don't have to repeat. So what Paul said about eligibility would certainly apply to the Lawrence Fellowship as well. The last slide that he gave on maximizing your chances, a lot of what he said there translates here. So my presentation is going to be much shorter, but I'll try to hit all the important points. So unlike the other fellowships that will be discussed here today, the Lawrence Fellow is open to a broader range of disciplines. So to give you an example, our the picture here is our class of 26 for fiscal year 2026. And we have a person doing research on wildfire mitigation. We have a person doing basic science on ion separation using membranes, and we have somebody doing high energy density science. So it really is crosses the full gamut of scientific disciplines. So so anyway, just keep that in mind as you're applying. We have a broader range for the Lawrence fellowships. But you are, as Paul said, with the HED fellowship, that you're going to be proposing your own research, and so you're coming up with your own independent research agenda, and you will be working, even though you're proposing your own research, during the interview process. If you don't already have a mentor in mind, we will pair you with somebody. So if you don't have a point of contact here, this is maybe a difference between HED fellowship, is you don't have to have a mentor identified. I think it helps if you have a connection here with somebody that's doing research that can help you frame your proposal appropriately, but you don't necessarily need to have somebody identified. We can work with you if you get far enough along in the application process. So, all right. Sorry, let's see here. All right. So the specifics. So the posting is live now. It went up in late July, and applications are due by October 1st. Last year, there was some confusion. I think we set it to be due by close of business October 1st. This year, we're going to avoid any sort of misunderstanding on that. So it's just, as of midnight on October 1, that's when the application will close. So we will allow applications right up until the end of October 1st. We have a review committee that's going to be going through the applications between October and late December to down select to our final 6 finalists. So unlike the HED fellowship, where you're going to have your mentor here make the case for why you should be one of the applicants that comes on site for an interview, we're actually just going to be the review committee, and I'll talk more about the review committee because I think it's an important part of this process in a second. But the review committee will be going through all the applications to get down to our final 6 that will be invited out for an interview. The interview days are typically a day and a half, but it's a good opportunity for the finalists to come and meet people at the lab and network. And oftentimes that's, again, where we are able to pair you with a mentor for if you are selected for the Lawrence Fellowship. Typically, our hiring decisions are made by mid to late February. And just to give you an idea, last year we had over 350 applicants, and we are choosing 3, so it's pretty competitive. And I'll also talk a little bit about where some of the applicants made mistakes that they ended up getting down selected almost immediately because of some issues with applications, which we'll talk about in a second. We invite out 6 finalists to choose 3 Lawrence Fellows. The guidance is up to 3 Lawrence Fellows, but we try to use all 3 spots. And typically, the quality of the finalists are high enough that we have no problem using all 3 of those positions. As far as outcomes go, we do convert. We have a process here at Livermore where we can directly convert our postdocs to staff members without actually having to interview again. And it depends on which organization you're in at Livermore, but most of them you basically are just through an internal process converted to staff. And we are retaining that number. Actually is a little bit lower now. I should update that for 2026, but between like 55 to 60% of our fellows we retain as staff members. But those who leave, typically going on to tenure track positions at top tier universities. This year we have one of our Lawrence Fellows that's in their 3rd year is going on to Princeton. And so just, to give you an idea of, just sort of some recent developments for our Lawrence Fellows. And actually, we have a number of them that have gone on to start their own companies. And actually, we had one a couple years ago leave to go work for a Major League Baseball team doing advanced analytics. And I'm sure lots of AI and machine learning aspects of that. So So the term is 3 years. So again, unlike some of the other fellowships, if everything goes as planned, the expectation is you'll get a full 3 years of funding. The funding is your salary plus up to 200K per year for research expenses. So essentially anything that's not your labor cost falls under this 200K. So if you're an experimentalist, that would, cover, consumables for your project. It can cover computing time. It can cover, small equipment purchases, but also can cover summer students. You can pay for staff members' time. The only thing you can't do with your funding as a Lawrence Fellow is hire another postdoc. So, and that would apply to all postdocs at the lab. We don't allow postdocs to hire other postdocs. Your salary, your starting salary for your first year, and we have escalators for each year that you're here as a postdoc, is 12,600-ish per month. That's for this year. We expect, as we do every year, we modify our salaries, and there'll probably be a slight bump for next year's Lawrence Fellows as well. All right. So for the actual application, what we're looking for is obviously your CV, a research impact statement that's fairly short but to the point about what you're interested in, a research proposal of no more than 6 pages, 3 letters of reference, and your transcripts. I know sometimes there's some issues with undergrad transcripts and stuff like that. As long as we have your graduate transcripts, that's important. But if you can provide the full set of transcripts, that's great. What we're going to be evaluating, so that's what you're going to be submitting. What are we looking at in terms of how we do our down selection and identification of our 6 finalists is, your statement of your interest obviously is important. What you're passionate about, what you want to work on as a fellow at Livermore. Your letters of rec are important as well. Your track record, so the committee definitely looks at not only publications, that's important, but also activity on the conference circuit. We like to see that you're engaged with your scientific community, and so having a number of entries associated with professional society conferences is important as well. And then alignment of your proposed research with the lab's mission, with Livermore's mission. And so that can be a little bit challenging for outside, people outside the lab, especially you're in grad school, you're just learning about the lab. That's where, we do have some information on the website, but if you could, if you have any connections here that can help you better understand what our mission is here, that can help you. But I don't want it to be a limiting factor for you, because we do fund Lawrence Fellows to do basic science. And so as long as it can be executed here at the lab, that's the other key part of this is, does it align with the lab mission, but can it actually be executed here? Are all the equipment infrastructure here to allow you to be successful in your project? So Paul already laid out our focus areas, and the reason I have this here, and this is important for people putting together the Lawrence Fellow proposals, is that our committee is 14 staff members, and there are 2 representatives for each of the 7 focus areas that here at the lab: the HED science, bioscience, lasers and optical science, earth and atmospheric science, advanced materials and manufacturing, nuclear and isotopic science, and high performance computing and data science. So you're going to have 2 people from each of those areas reading your proposal. So this is going to be a panel of non-experts evaluating the research that you're proposing. So it's really important when you put together that 6-page research proposal that you can go into the weeds and get specific about what you want to do, but your overview and your initial introduction to that area should be written generally enough that the non-expert can follow you at least to a point in what you're proposing. We hope to actually pair your proposal up with someone who's an expert in your field, but you're going to have 13 other committee members reviewing your proposal that are non-experts. So you need to be able to craft it in a way that is understandable to a non-expert. And that may be new to you as a grad student or maybe a postdoc. You know, you're used to presenting to panels or committees that are experts in your area. So now you're branching out into, you're proposing to non-experts. So it's really important to, like I said, for that first page or two of your proposal, write it broadly enough that everybody could grasp it. As somebody that served on many review committees, if the second sentence is really going into the weeds, you've lost me as a reviewer. It really minimizes your chances of at least getting through to later rounds in the evaluation. The one other thing I wanted to say, the letters of recommendation. This is very key. So the application date for all of your information is October 1st. We allow for an extra week for the letters to be submitted from the people that are writing the reference letters. Do not ask someone who you're not confident can get that in by October 7th or 8th to write a letter for you. We have a lot of I think high quality applicants that end up getting down selected out of the process because only one or two of their letters were submitted. So it's painful to do that because I know that they put a lot of effort in, but we see it every year. There's probably like, of the 350 applications, there's probably like 50 or 60 that we immediately down select because they don't have the full 3 letters in. So make sure that your person that you're asking can meet that date. Otherwise, move on to the next person. It's better to maybe have someone who is not as familiar with your work that can at least get a letter in versus somebody who, is familiar but is maybe not as reliable in terms of meeting those deadlines. So yeah, I think those are my 3 slides. And so I am going to stop sharing here, but when we get into the question and answer period, I'm more than happy. If I miss something, I'm happy to answer questions about that. So
Thank you, Ted. Arjun, can you share your slide?
Yes, I just want to thank you, Paul, for this opportunity again to talk about the Foster Brown Fellowship. And I want to start just by apologizing that I'm actually out of town across the country, so I don't have a setup where I have a webcam. So I'm just going to be presenting to you this way. So apologies for that. But the very nice thing of going after both Paul and Ted is a lot of things that they've already presented on also apply for the Foster Brown Fellowships. And so I will try to just highlight the things that are different. And I think these fellowships are subtly different. And so I'll try to just go over those things and draw extra attention to those differences. So the first thing is originally this started as kind of 2 fellowships, the Foster Fellowship and Brown Fellowship, but very recently it's been combined into, now we call our fellows Foster Brown Fellows. So it's kind of 1 fellowship, but we have up to 2 slots, and in fact we have some flexibility where hypothetically we could even have more, though typically what we say is we have up to 2 slots in a year, but we do try to accommodate details based on the application pool of if we have a very strong pool, we do have some added agility there on who we will end up extending an offer to. So the Foster Brown Fellowship is in honor of these 2 individuals. So if you just Google Foster Brown Fellowship or Foster Brown Fellowship Livermore, you'll get to this page. And this has a lot of the information of what the fellowship is about, how to apply, the timeline, and other details. So as I mentioned, this fellowship is really paying tribute to these 2 individuals who in the early days of the laboratory, did a lot of tremendous work to advance the presence and contributions of the laboratory. So these were the third and fourth directors of the laboratory. And maybe you can read about these individuals later. Just some cool things I learned after taking over this fellowship is this part here. Johnny Foster was actually responsible for starting a biomedical sciences area at the laboratory. So he had a lot to do with bringing a research portfolio of breadth to the laboratory. And now, as Paul had outlined, and so did Ted, we work on many different areas. And something that's near and dear to my heart is Harold Brown in the very early 60s was one of the initial leaders that pushed for integrating what was then computer science, or really just using computational calculations to do national security work and science work that's relevant to the mission. So as Paul mentioned at the beginning, referencing LCAP, high performance computing is very big at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and many of the other DOE labs as well. And so a large part of that goes to the initial seeding efforts of Harold Brown. And so if you've used HPC resources or applications from any of the DOE national laboratories, Dr. Harold Brown had a role to play with that in the very early days. So I think in terms of what we look for and successful application, there's a lot of similarities to the high energy density science fellowship and Lawrence fellowships. I will talk about a few of the differences. So the first is that since this fellowship is really a tribute to these two individuals, and we think of the fellowship as embodying the mission that they started, we really look for alignment with what is called the Strategic Deterrence Directorate. And if I were to click on this link, it would take you to the website here. So this is a directorate within Lawrence Livermore Lab that is very focused on national security and the national security mission space that the lab is involved in. And so we look for many of the same things that have already been said. We look for strong references, high impact research portfolio, those kinds of things. But on top of that, we want to make sure that the applicant is well aligned with the national security mission of the laboratory. And so this fellowship is tailored towards that specifically. So the projects that most applicants apply with and write about in their proposal, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, have to do with the initiatives of strategic deterrence. And you might wonder, what are those initiatives? So there's a few things I can say about this. The first is if you have a mentor at the laboratory, as Ted was previously mentioning, it's great to reach out to them and ask for some broader context of what is currently being prioritized within the national security space at the laboratory. And just like all fields of science, there's kind of a waxing and waning of certain things. And in a certain set of years, one question might be very interesting, and then the space moves on to another. And so for those kinds of things, I would encourage you to reach out to mentors if you have them at Livermore. But a few high-level things I can say is I would look at the website and look at some of the areas that are listed there. And also here is the posting for if you can see the screen switch for the Foster Brown Fellowship. And these are all successful areas in which fellows have worked. So many of these things have been talked about by the previous speakers, such as inertial confinement fusion and the physics of that. That's the National Ignition Facility that Paul was talking about, and it relates a lot to the high energy density work that he was mentioning. And planetary defense is another big one, and we've had multiple successful fellows in that space. And then you can see it's all over the place. There's a lot of breadth with CFD applications, radiation transport, nuclear physics. A recent one is AI, and we have an ongoing uncertainty quantification effort that's very big within the directorate. So this is to give you a little bit of a flavor of the kinds of things that I think we look for. This is not an exhaustive list, but as I mentioned before, a key piece of gauging the application materials is alignment to the priorities of the directorate. So I think it's a little bit different from the Lawrence Fellowship that what Ted was talking about in that way of that alignment is really important. And so even if there's other resources and aspects of the laboratory where one could do their work and succeed at the lab, for specifically the Foster Brown Fellowship, that tie into the national security mission is very important. And kind of in that vein, another difference to the high energy density fellowship that was mentioned is for the Foster Brown Fellowship, our requirements are that in addition to having a PhD by the time they start and some of the other things that were mentioned, we require applicants to be US citizens and to maintain a US security Q clearance. So the motivation for this is that once successful fellows arrive, we want them to be exposed to the full context of the national security work that's done at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And shortly after they arrive, we put the paperwork in for them to get a Q clearance and kind of then learn of have a kind of full window view into the work that's done, especially within the SD Directorate. I will say, though, to be clear, we do not expect, and it is certainly not required for any postdoctoral fellows, including Foster Brown fellows, to do work that requires a Q clearance. This is for exposure only. And in fact, we cannot ask you to do work that is not widely publishable and can't be reviewed out in the open. So even though we have this requirement, I want to make clear that we don't want to see any proposals that have to do with requiring a clearance or anything like that. So it is still a postdoctoral fellowship. The main motivation and goal is still to advance your career trajectory with publishable work. And as Ted was mentioning of successful Lawrence Fellows, moving on to other aspects of industry or successfully getting permanent positions in academia, we certainly have the same track record and want the same things for our fellows here. So I just want to be clear on that requirement. Now, I want to go into some of the other application materials. So if you on this website, once again, you just Google Foster Brown Fellowship and you'll get there. If one was to click on download PDF, we'll come here. And this is a document that goes over in some details what we're looking for. I'm not going to go over all of these details, though I'm happy to take questions afterwards if there's any specific questions on things that I'm just going to skim over here. So there's a couple things that I want to draw your attention to. The first is that we require many of the same things as the other fellowships. That is, we require a CV, we require at least 3 references, though there is an option to submit more, and there's some detailed text of what to do in that case and when it's appropriate. So I would encourage anyone interested to read up on that. And also we require transcripts, and ideally they're digital transcripts. But on top of that, we also want to see a research proposal. And on top of that, there's also this project relevance statement. So this is the first thing. This is about, it's intended to be about a paragraph or so long, so just a few sentences. And this is not the research proposal itself. This is kind of a separate document or a separate little excerpt describing how the research that the applicant outlines is relevant to the mission at Livermore, specifically the national security mission in strategic deterrence. So certainly one should not be giving any details here. This is kind of just very high level how you can connect to the legacy of Foster Brown, so to speak, that I was mentioning earlier. And then apart from that is the actual statement of research, which is right here. So there's text I would encourage you to look at. And this is going to be very much like the other proposal. So you'll write a proposal. You can include plots and charts once you get into the details. I would echo what Ted said of if you're in the second sentence going into the weeds, I think that is not going to be looked favorably by the committee. So start very high level, talk about why the research is important to LNL and how you plan to do it. So this part right here and connect it to SD. And then you can make your way into some of the details. The goal of this proposal is for the candidate to demonstrate two things. The first is their understanding of the priorities of the Strategic Deterrence Directorate. And I would say the things I flashed from the job posting, these are all still very relevant to things we care about. But as I said earlier, I'd recommend reaching out to a mentor if you have one at Livermore, and you can get more information from them. And so the first thing is understanding what is relevant to SD. And then the second thing that the proposal gives applicants the chance to illustrate is their skills, knowledge, and abilities, and their aptitude towards supporting that understanding and those initiatives. So it's one, kind of a gauge of the alignment, and two, the applicant can demonstrate their experience so far and the research portfolio they have and how it relates to that first point. So that's what we look for. Maybe something else I want to mention, which is I think subtly different from the other two fellowships, is you don't necessarily have to have a mentor ahead of time. So that's how this fellowship is different from the HED fellowship. But also, the proposal is used as a application material, and so we have successfully matriculated fellows, Foster Brown fellows, for which the project they work on is actually slightly different from the project that they wrote about in their proposal. And so this is kind of a key difference from, say, maybe the Lawrence Fellowship, is the committee may decide that the proposal looks great, it's well aligned, but for example, the funding needs are such that that specific project isn't what SD, our directorate, is currently looking for. And in those cases, we don't immediately just down select away that application. We'll look to see if there's a close match elsewhere. And if this sounds kind of vague and abstract, maybe a concrete example I can give that happened over the last couple of years is one of our candidates wrote about using AI and ML techniques, and they had a background doing this already in grad school. And so they understood parts of the physics they were applying to very well, and the numerics and the interplay between that and the ML. And so they wrote about a specific piece of physics that they wanted to apply this to. And the committee thought that this was a very strong proposal and application, but the particular piece of physics that they wrote about is something that after consulting with some of the kind of funding gurus within SD, there was another piece of physics that was, I think, slightly more important. And so we had a discussion, and ultimately we kind of shifted the project a little bit towards that other piece of physics while keeping all of the background and all of the methodologies that the candidate would use the same. And so just for awareness, want to mention that that can happen. When it does, we never do a far field switch. It's usually to a very close adjacent project, and certainly still within the candidate's kind of home research field. We're not going to ask a theoretical high energy physicist to start doing trapped ion experiments at a lab or something like that. But small shifts we kind of have the flexibility to do based on what we see internally are the needs. So a couple remaining things. We at the bottom of this document, if you click on this link, let me see if I can, I think I have it up here. You'll get an example research statement. And so I would encourage anyone interested to look into this. This is not a kind of toy research proposal or something generated by an LLM. This is an actual research proposal that was successfully funded with just a few of the personal details redacted. So this is a real world example of something that worked. And so I would highly encourage, really, if you're interested in any of these fellowships, this may be a good place to start for at least the formatting and structure, but certainly for the Foster Brown Fellowship. This is the kind of thing that I would aim for. And then finally, I'll just end with the timeline down here. It's very similar to the other fellowships that Paul and Ted already mentioned. We have a deadline for all application materials on the last Monday of September, which is the 28th of September. And just like the other two, at least 3 letters are due 1 week after that. I will say, in my experience, as Ted was also mentioning, really this can be a sticky point. So I would encourage you to contact your letter of recommendation writers as soon as possible. And ideally, because this is based on constraints kind of outside of the applicant's control, I would aim to have everything done really before this date or even this date if you can manage it. So that gives you some breathing room. And in this intervening week, if an applicant has all materials in except there's like a letter missing or something like that, the admin that's responsible for this fellowship, Tricia Marquis at the bottom, will try to contact that candidate and remind them to get like a missing letter in. So because we offer that kind of courtesy, the sooner you can get all the other application materials in, the better, so that you can kind of be on that list to make sure you're aware if there's one letter that's kind of straggling, and we can make sure that's filled in. And I will say, I echo what Ted said, that sometimes it's unfortunate, but we have to eliminate applications, even though a lot of effort has clearly been put into them, but there's a letter or two missing. So please pay attention to that. And then the timeline for the rest is very similar to the others. This is what we expect, though year to year it changes. So I'm going to end there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Arjun. Daniel.
I will be speaking to you today about the Sydney Fernbach Fellowship. I am going to stop the video now so that hopefully my slides go smoothly. All right. Share. Is it there? Do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Make sure that they're backward. Fine. Okay. So all right. Yeah, I think they work. Okay. So thanks everyone. Thanks for having me join this session. It's good that I'm coming last, especially with the productivity issues I'm having, but everything that has been said so far is relevant to the Fernbach Fellowship as well. I am going to focus more on the, give you an overview of kind of the type of research that we do in computing, and then dig a little bit more into maybe the fellowship itself and highlight some of the differences with some of the other ones that you've heard of already. So the computing directorate is one of the directorates of the lab, and it essentially underpins all of LLNL's competencies that Paul mentioned earlier. So if you care about algorithms, you can find a place for you to apply them. If you care about physics simulations, there's plenty of work to do here. Our research is not done in a vacuum because it's directly supports the LLNL's competencies and mission space. You can actually see your research take legs and be applied somewhere at the lab or even in the scientific community at large. We have specific expertise in HPC, data science, in addition to computational math, physics, and computational physics and numerical algorithms as well. Let's see. Next slide.
And Daniel, can you get rid of the, oh, great. You're able to do it.
Okay. All right. So this slide was, just to highlight that Livermore has world-class facilities and resources that provide unique opportunities for you and the staff here to conduct groundbreaking research in science and engineering. So we have about 3 exaflops total peak of compute power. Our unclassified systems have about 363 petaflops, several GPUs, and they occupy large floor space, as you can see. One of the take homes for this slide is that if you look at all the top 50, top 100, top 500, even 500 and production systems across all the DOE labs, Livermore accounts for about a third of each of those clusters. So it essentially, tells you the support and resource support we have here as far as HPC is concerned in doing computational science in the lab. Okay. So the computing directorate has several divisions, and the Center for Applied Scientific Computing, CASC, is the main research arm of the directorate. We have the mission of CASC is to deliver innovative research and software technologies that advance computational sciences in the interest of the nation. And most of our researchers sit here. So most of our postdocs sit here as well. In fact, currently all our postdocs are in CASC. We have about 150 researchers, including about 16 postdocs. Our research, as I mentioned before, is application driven, supported in supporting LLNL's mission space. Because we have a strong connection with academia and industry, there's a lot of creators, and so it's not just research for LLNL, but we also do work for others as well. And our staff has expertise in computational math, data science, scientific computing. I'll show you kind of a breakdown of kind of the groups at CASC so you can get an idea of the breadth of it. So as promised, the multiple research groups that fosters cross-disciplinary research in computing. So there's math and algorithms group, there's numerical analysis, scientific computing, computational physics, UQ, machine learning, informatics, data science, and then research software, parallel systems, and so on. And all our staff often collaborate across these disciplines. So when you come in as a postdoc, our postdocs also sit in one of these groups depending on their expertise. And oftentimes, yeah, you may straddle one or more of the groups, which is fine. But you'll have a group leader that and a collection of other researchers that share a common or have a common background. And then you can certainly also interact or collaborate with other people in other groups as well. So diving into the Fernbach Fellowship, the Signy Fernbach Fellowship is computing's flagship postdoctoral appointment. It was named after pioneering high-performance computing, high-performance scientific computing, Signy Fernbach, who was a former computing director as well. The fellowship began about 13 years ago, maybe in 2012. That's when we had our first fellow, and it was awarded every other year until I think 2020, where we switched to every year. On average, we have about 40, 50 applicants applying. Last year was significantly different. We had about 80 plus applicants applying for last year, so it's pretty competitive. But what we look for is an outstanding candidate with exceptional talent and scientific scientific track record, so in publications and so several first author publications is good. And then we also particularly look for potential for achievements in computational math, scientific computing, computer science, data science, and AI for science as well. Now, what you get from being a fellow is the freedom to pursue your own research agenda, like the other fellowships here. You have, you have a purse to salary, and then some additional sort of funding for travel and supplementary expenses, like Ted mentioned. But yeah, so you have the freedom to pursue your own research agenda, which you will propose as part of your application here. You have the opportunity to work in a cutting-edge interdisciplinary environment. Hopefully, you saw that from the talks you heard already, and then from the group slide I showed you earlier. You get to collaborate with accomplished researchers. You'll be paired with a mentor here, but unlike the HEDS fellowship, you don't need to declare one before you come in. We'll find one for you based on your interests and research plan proposal. And then you also have access to world-class HPC resources. Okay, so our past fellows represent a broad range of disciplines in computing. So as I mentioned, since the fellowship started, we've had about we're going on 10 fellows now, and given that we started about every other year and then switching to one a year after 2020. Most of our fellows go on to have successful careers in academia and industry. Currently, Stephanie and Stephen are staff here at Lawrence Livermore. And then Robert and Daniel are current fellows. So Robert is from 2024, and then Daniel's from 2025. But this slide was just to showcase the breadth of research from that our fellows usually engage in. So we go from performance modeling to computational physics to machine learning and AI research. So the eligibility rules, as again, similar to what has been presented already. But just to add to that, you must soon receive a PhD in one of the computational math or computational science disciplines. We require CV, transcripts, also 3 letters of recommendation, and a research statement. And the appointment is up to 2 years, but like all postdoctoral appointments at the lab or in com, it's renewable every year. So, but you typically you usually have funded up to 2 years. That's the term of the fellowship. So the research statement, I wanted to give you a little bit more kind of input about the research statement. It needs to be succinct, not more than 6 pages. And like Arjun and Ted said, start high level and then refine as you go. But by page 6, you should be winding down. If you go beyond that, it becomes a little bit too long to read. And then in that document, you want to summarize your research interests, identify or highlight the importance of the proposed research and how it aligns with the lab's interest, right? Research interest of the lab, and perhaps also the scientific community at large. If you can identify how it could advance, computing at a lab, that would be excellent too. As I said, identify the importance of performing this research at Livermore. So you might want to highlight what resources at the lab or personnel and otherwise that could help you succeed in in undertaking that research. And then finally, you want to include a description of the research plan, basically how you plan to carry out, timelines and everything for the proposed work. As Paul said, it's really a good idea to reach out to Livermore scientists or researchers that are doing work that either could support what you're doing or benefit from what you're interested in proposing, right? Or that could be potential collaborators. The reason being that it forces you to try and present your proposal in the context of how beneficial it would be to Livermore, right? So you have a strong benefit to the lab component there. If you already have relationships here, it doesn't hurt to have them write a letter of recommendation for you, for example. If you don't, that's fine. Just reaching out to them and discussing your plan with them, and then highlighting that in your research statement is definitely helpful, because as I said, you don't need to have a mentor identified, but through these conversations that you have, we may be able to identify someone for you. So here's a list of the qualifications that we look for and what the committee uses essentially for evaluating the application. So you should have demonstrated creativity and superior knowledge in the computing sciences. You should have demonstrated ability to conduct original research. Advanced written and verbal communication skills. We expect you to have that. You have to present your work to us. So if you have that, that's good. And then also, we expect that you will be able to write strong scientific technical papers while here as a postdoc. And then one of the other things we look for is demonstrated potential for technical leadership, because the hope is that you will be a leader in the field that you're proposing. And then because we are very collaborative division or directorate, and actually the lab in general is very collaborative, you must be able to work as part of a team, but also be able to independently, advance your research as well. It's important that your entire application package showcase these qualities. So if you're submitting your CV, highlight some of these things in there. If you're submitting your research statement should also highlight some of these, and then one thing that really helps is if your references also highlight some of these things in there. The committee takes that information seriously. So be strategic on who you ask to write your references. If they know you well and they can speak to some of your strengths here, then that's who you should go for, and encourage them to do that. The timeline is as follows. So applications usually open between August and September. So we will be opening it up, I think, the next week. It should be open. And then the deadline, it should end sometime late October. And like the other fellowships, we give you a little bit of extra time to get all the references in. But it's always a good idea to get them in ahead of time. We've had a few cases where we had to ask for references, but that's likely not going to happen frequently. Depends on if the admin sees that or not. And then November to January, the committee sits and reviews down selects from the application pool to, maybe about 5. And then out of the 5, we also do another round of down selecting to bring in about 3 for interviewing. So after the finalist interviews, they get notified sometime in March. And then the employment actually begins sometime between August and October. That's the time frame where we expect you to be able to begin your employment. So as I mentioned before, you need to have been awarded a PhD at the time of the hire date. And let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is my last slide. Contact is Daniel Springer. That's a main point of contact. You can also reach out to me if you have questions. And then the website has more information that will highlight. I'll tell you more information about the fellowship. That's all I have.
Thank you, Daniel. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat. And there are already a few questions there, which I will go through. So first question was, do transcripts need to be official or can they be unofficial? So I can answer for the HEDS Fellowship. We do accept unofficial transcripts. Obviously, don't fake any transcripts. That will come up later and would be very, very bad. But the others could answer with respect to their own fellowships.
The Lawrence Fellowship would be the same, at least for the initial submission. If it's unofficial, that's fine.
And
It's the same for comp as well. I mean, for the Fernbach Fellowship. Sorry.
Yeah. So for Foster Brown Fellowship, we want electronic transcripts, and that's the preference. So however that can be delivered. If they're unofficial at the time one applies, certainly that gets checked if an offer is sent out through HR. And so, as Paul said, it's really bad. And if there's a discrepancy later when official ones are compared to, that's going to be found out.
thank you. And the next question is, for letters of recommendation, will we know when they are submitted? I'm not sure if there's an automatic email sent out, but certainly I go through and check if there are missing letters, and I will try to notify people that there's a missing letter if we're getting close to the deadline. And I think similar things was already said.
Yeah, we do the same for Fernbach as well. Similarly, closer to deadline, we will check and reach out if they're not in yet.
Same for us.
I'm not. My understanding is that when you you have an application that you can check back in and see if all the letters are in. We have too many for us to actually remind people, so it's sort of on you. But if you have questions, you can certainly reach out if you submit and you're saying, I can't figure out if the professor submitted it, can you check? We can do that for you.
And then there's a question, even if specifying a mentor in the Lawrence application is not required, are we required to do so if we know, are we encouraged to do so if we know who we'd like to work with?
So yes, it's not required. I don't want people to think that that's a barrier to entry here. Yes, I would include it in your research plan. Mention the people. I mean, make sure that you have their buy-in, but if they're on board, include them in your research proposal by name. The reviewers will see that. So.
And upon selection, what would be the expected start date for the fellowship? Since PhD completion dates can vary from person to person, is there a latest date by which the postdoctoral appointment must begin? I would say the latest for the HEDS Fellowship that we would like could maybe be January of the following year. So 2028 would be the latest. I don't know if the other chairs have opinions on that.
Yeah, so I can say for the Foster Brown Fellowship, it's kind of similar. So like there are fellowships, the application is due this fall around the September-October timeframe, 2026, and the expectation is that the PhD will be completed by The target is ideally a late summer to early fall, so sometime between August, September, October of 2027. I think the latest is December 2027, so similar to the HED fellowship. I will say that if this is a concern for a particular candidate, they should reach out to me. We have some flexibility to accommodate specific circumstances if there's good reasons, but certainly if it's looking like it's outside of that window, at a minimum, a conversation needs to happen about what's going on there.
Similarly, as I mentioned, for Fernbach, it's between August and October. But yeah, if like Adam said, same here. If you have to be outside that window, yeah, reach out and we can talk about that.
Yeah, for the Lawrence Fellow, we do have flexibility. Typically, what we're asked about is early starts more than late starts. So, and we are able, ideally, everybody would start on October 1 because that's the beginning of the fiscal year for us, and that's when the funding, this particular funding stream, it's when it turns on for the new fiscal year. But if we know enough ahead of time, we can start you early, and certainly pushing it to the end of the calendar year, so through December, I think is okay. But once we start getting into January, February of the next year, that's maybe more problematic. But yes, we can start you early or a month or two late. That's definitely an option if needed.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ted. I guess I should say for the Foster Brown Fellowship, early starts have also been, that's been a popular question for us, and we have a good amount of flexibility to, we've had a case where even late spring was okay to start early. So there is kind of that wider window, but that is kind of a case-by-case basis that conversation happens afterwards through the process for us.
Yeah, I'll just second all of what was said. That yeah, we can accommodate early starts as well. So we can start people as early as like July. Are there any other questions? So there's a question about foreign nationals with the new rules for F1 students. OPD EAD processing timelines are currently unknown, as this is new rule of case-by-case basis for extension of status. Will that be taken into account for appointment of start dates? So yes, obviously you must be able to legally work within the country in order to start the fellowship. We would try to work with you to make sure your visa status is valid. I don't know the latest rules for visa. Does anybody know any of the latest visa changes?
I'm not fluent in all of it, but I would say that if you get far enough in the process and there's questions, our International Services Office is great, and they are the first people I call when there's any questions about this, and they can give us guidance. So if you end up being one of our 6 finalists and you were concerned about that, we could certainly, we can have those conversations with experts, because I'd hate to say anything here that is misleading or or misconstrued. So just to say we have experts that we can consult with, at least from the Lawrence Fellow stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree that we would definitely confer with the experts. And we apply for both the HEDS and Lawrence Fellowships on a similar research proposal. And I would say that's definitely yes. You should apply to anything that you are eligible for. Of course, there's slightly different focuses and styles for the proposals. So you'll probably need to change things a little bit. But I encourage you to apply for both, and you don't need to make it in a completely different topic.
Yep. Maximize your chances. We see it every
Yeah.
year. There's overlap between the applications in the fellowship. So Yeah, don't limit yourself.
Yep, and we've had people become finalists for up to 3 fellowships at the same time. I don't think there's ever been one that's gotten all 4 of our fellowships as a finalist. But that would be a tremendous goal to have. Anyway, any other questions? Well, if not, I'd like to thank all our chairs for joining us for this information session. I'll stick around for a few more minutes in case anybody wants to, was too shy to ask a question already. And otherwise, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day and good luck on your applications.